We're gonna read some Michael Crichton, the Andromeda Strain. I don't know what I'm getting into. I'm only reading this because, well, I heard he's a good author, and two, he wrote Jurassic Park, and I really want to read Jurassic Park, but I have bad OCD, and I don't want to read Jurassic Park before I read his other works, because I have a fear that Jurassic Park might be one of his best books, and then if I go back to his earlier books, they're just not as good, and that worries me. So I'm just gonna read from his first novel all the way up to his final. And it looks like the Andromeda Strain is first. I cannot wait to read Jurassic Park. I cannot wait. I hear it's a little scarier and a little more violent than the movie. Can you imagine what would have happened if James Cameron fucking directed Jurassic Park? That would have been crazy. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten whatever Avatar. Maybe it would have been something else, you know what I mean? As you are aware of, if you want to read a hardback and it has a sleeve attached, you should always take it off, because it damages the sleeve, and you should preserve it if you're into that stuff. If you want to preserve it, you should take it off. Wow. Well, it better be good. Now let's begin. More praise for nationwide bestsellers by Michael Crichton, The Andromeda Strain, Andromeda, The Great Train Robbery. 3 complete novels by Michael Crichton. 3 complete novels by Michael Crichton, The Andromeda Strain, The Terminal Man, The Great Train Robbery. Contents. The Andromeda Strain. For ACDMD, who first proposed the problem. The survival value of human intelligence has never been satisfactorily demonstrated, says Jeremy Stone. Increasing vision is increasingly expensive, says R.A. Janik. Andromeda Strain. Andromeda Strain. The file is classified top secret. Examination by unauthorized persons is a criminal offense, punishable by fines and imprisonment up to 20 years and $20,000. Do not accept from courier if seal is broken. The seal is broken. I'm not trying to get fined. The courier is required by law to demand your card 7592. He is not permitted to relinquish this file without such proof of identity. If so, well, I don't have a card. Machine score review below. As you can see, the book opens up with a classified document. If you guys are gonna stay, be warned, you may be facing 20 years in prison or $20,000 in fines. That's terrifying. But, shit, I'm intrigued. Let's see What's so classified about this Andromeda strain? Acknowledgements. Damn it. Can I just get a book without acknowledgements? This book recounts the 5-day history of a major American scientific crisis. As in most cities, the events surrounding the Andromeda strain were a compound of foresight and foolishness, innocence and ignorance. Nearly everyone involved had moments of great brilliance and moments of unaccountable stupidity. It is therefore impossible to write about the events without offending some of the participants. This book was published 72. Oh no, 69. However, I think it is important that the story must be told. This country supports the largest scientific establishment in the history of mankind. New discoveries are constantly being made, and many of these discoveries have important political, social overtones. In the near future, we can expect more crises on the pattern of Andromeda. Thus, I believe it is useful for the public to be made aware of the way in which scientific crises arise and are dealt with. Okay. So this is probably going to show you how disease is spread. It's probably going to talk about that. It's going to talk about how people ignore the warning signs and, and they basically ignore all the precursors. Following a disease, this is stories like the reason why I think that is because every single disease story you ever hear does the same intro. It shows how the disease spreads because no one cares. Doctors see it, they don't care. Politicians see it, they don't care. Sometimes they even use it for their own political benefits. So I have a feeling we might touch on all these things and how people who are handling these diseases in quarantine or in laboratories, how they don't take the full precautions that are needed to handle such strains, right? Diseases. So, Resident Evil, So, Resident Evil had a cool intro. I don't think it started like that. In researching and recounting the history of the Andromeda strain, I received the generous help of many people who felt as I did, and who encouraged me to tell the story accurately and in detail. My particular thanks must go to Major General Willis A. Haverford, United States Army, Lieutenant Everett J. Sloan, United States Navy, Returant, Captain Ellis Waterhouse, United States Air Force, Vandenberg, Special Projects Division, Colonel Henry Jackson, and Colonel Stanley Frederick, both of Wright-Patterson, and Murray Charles of the Pentagon Press Division. Are these real people? Murray Charles is not a real name. A political scientist. Colonel. No, he's not a colonel. And the Pentagon Press Division. For their help in elucidating the background of the wildfire project, I must thank Roger White, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, John Roble, NASA Kennedy Complex 13, Peter J. Mason, NASA Intelligence, Dr. Francis Martin, University of California, and the President's Science Advisory Council, Dr. Max Byard, Kenneth Voorhees, White House Press Corps, and Professor Jonathan Percy of the University of Chicago, for their review of relevant chapters of the manuscript and for the technical corrections and suggestions. I wish to thank Christian P. Lewis, Goddard Space Flight Center, Herbert Staunch, Avco Inc., James P. Baker, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Carlos N. Sandos, California Institute of Technology, Dr. Brian Stack, University of Michigan, Edgar Blalock, Hudson Institute, Professor Linson Kajelling, the Rand Corporation, Dr. Eldridge Benson, National Institutes of Health. Lastly, I wish to thank the participants in the wildfire project and the investigation of the so-called Andromeda strain. Is that real? Is this thing real? Andromeda? It can't be real. This isn't a real thing that happened. It looks like it's a book. But is it real? Huh. It's a movie already? I didn't know that. Is the movie any good? It got a 7 out of 10, so it's alright. Nominated for 2 Oscars. I should check it out. I didn't know there was a movie. All agreed to see me, and with many, my interviewers lasted over a period of days. Furthermore, I was able to draw upon the transcripts of their debriefing, which are stored in Arlington Hall, Substation 7, and which amounted to more than 15,000 pages of typewritten manuscript. This material, stored in 20 volumes, represents the full story of the events at Flat Rock, Nevada, as told by each of the participants, and I was thus able to utilize their separate viewpoints in preparing a composite account. This is a rather technical narrative, centering on complex issues of science. Wherever possible, I have explained the scientific questions, problems, and techniques. I have avoided the temptation to simplify both the issues and the answers, and if the reader must occasionally struggle through an arid passage of technical detail, I apologize. Aww. I have also tried to retain the tension and excitement of events in these 5 days, for there is an inherent drama in the story of Andromeda, and if it is a chronicle of stupid, deadly blunders, it is also a chronicle of heroism and intelligence. Michael Crichton, Cambridge, Massachusetts, January 1969. Day 1. Contact. Five-day history of a major American scientific crisis? Is that real? 5-day major. What does that mean? Everywhere you go online says, no, it's not a real book, but the acknowledgements do say it's a 5-day history. What does that mean? They all say a technical narrative. No, I don't want the forward. I want you to tell. I need AI. What is it? Gemini? I have to ask AI. Michael Crichton's Andromeda strain states In acknowledgement, it's based on a 5-day scientific crisis. So, it's real? Question mark? Techno thriller. Huh. I don't know. It looks like it's not real. Anyway, it looks like we're on day 1. Contact, so I guess all we can do is see if it's any good. Who's Michael Crichton? What's all the hype about? Hey, I heard the hype. Creator of Jurassic Park. Let me see what you're all about. Chapter 1. The County of Lost Borders. A man with binoculars. That is how it began. With a man standing by the side of the road on a crest overlooking a small Arizona town on a winter night. Lieutenant Roger Sean must have found the binoculars difficult. The metal would be cold and he would be clumsy in his fur parka and heavy gloves. His breath hissing out into the moonlit air would have fogged the lenses. He would be forced to pause to wipe them frequently using a stubby gloved finger. He could not have known the futility of this action. Binoculars were worthless to see into that town and uncover its secrets. He would have been astonished to learn that the men who finally succeeded used instruments 1,000,000 times more powerful than binoculars. There is something sad, foolish, and human in the image of Sean leaning against a boulder, popping his arms on it, and holding the binoculars to his eyes. Though cumbersome, the binoculars would at least feel comfortable and familiar in his hands. It would be one of the last familiar sensations before his death. Okay, so he's about to die. Interesting. Mwah. I love my kitty. We can imagine and try to reconstruct what happened from that point on. Lieutenant Sean swept over the town slowly and methodically. He could not see it was not large. He could see it was not large. Just a half a dozen wooden buildings set out along a single main street. It was very quiet, no lights, no activity, no sound carried by the gentle wind. He shifted his attention from the town to the surrounding hills. They were low, dusty, and blunted, with scrubby vegetation and an occasional withered yucca tree crested in snow. Beyond the hills were more hills, and then the flat expanse of the Mojave Desert, trackless and vast. The Indians called it the Country of Lost Borders. Lieutenant Sean found himself shivering in the wind. It was February, the coldest month, and it was after 10. He walked back up the road toward the Ford Econovan, with the large rotating antenna on top. The motor was idling softly. It was the only sound he could hear. He opened the rear doors and climbed into the back, shutting the doors behind him. He was enveloped in deep red light, a night light, so that he would not be blinded when he stepped outside. In the red light, the banks of instruments and electronic equipment glowed greenly. Ooh, that was some good writing right there. The red was growing greenly. That was good. That was pretty good. Private Louis Crane, the electronics technician, was there, also wearing a parka. He was hunched over a map, making calculations with occasional reference to the instruments before him. Sean asked Crane if he were certain they had arrived at the place, and Crane confirmed that they had. Both men were tired. They had driven all day from Vandenberg in search of the latest Scoop satellite. Neither knew much about the Scoops, except that they were a series of secret capsules intended to analyze the upper atmosphere and then return. Sean and Crane had the job of finding the capsules once they landed. In order to facilitate recovery, the satellites were fitted with electronic beepers that began to transmit signals when they came down to an altitude of 5 miles. That was why the van had so much radio directional equipment in essence. It was performing its own triangulation. The Army parlance, it was known as single unit triangulation, and it was highly effective, though slow. What's a parlance? Like like just a piece of land? A particular way of speaking, using words, especially a way to those. Okay. That's interesting. How did he use it? In Army parlance, it was known as single unit triangulation, and it was highly effective, though slow. The procedure was simple enough. The van stopped and fixed its position, recording the strength and direction of the radio beam from the satellite. Once this was done, it would be driven in the most likely direction of the satellite for a distance of 20 miles. Then it would stop and make new coordinates. In this way, a series of triangulation points could be mapped, and the van could proceed to the satellite by a zigzag path, stopping every 20 miles to correct my error. The method was slower than using 2 vans, but it was safer. The Army felt that 2 vans in an area might arouse suspicion. For 6 hours, the van had been closing on the Scoop satellite. Now they were almost there. Crane tapped the map with a pencil in a nervous way and announced the name of the town at the foot of the hill. Piedmont, Arizona. Population 48. Both men laughed over that. Hold on. I was distracted by my cat. The Army felt that 2 vans in an area might arouse suspicion. For 6 hours, the van had been closing on the Scoop satellite. Now they were almost there. Crane tapped the map with a pencil in a nervous way and announced, "Who's Crane?" His Lieutenant Sean. A man with binoculars. So the guy with the binoculars is that should be Sean. Roger Sean, right? Sean, yeah. And now there's a guy called Crane. Alright, whatever. These are old pages. This could be worth a lot of money one day. But I don't have the original one. The original one is supposed to be like red. Whatever. Crane tapped the map with a pencil in a nervous way and announced the name of the town at the foot of the hill. Piedmont, Arizona. Population 48. Both men laughed over that, though they were both inwardly concerned. The Vandenberg ESA, or estimated site of arrival, had been 12 miles north of Piedmont. Vandenberg computed this site on the basis of radar observations and 1410 computer trajectory projections. The estimates were not usually wrong by more than a few hundred yards. Yet, there was no denying the radio directional equipment which located the satellite beeper directly in the center of town. Sean suggested that someone from the town might have seen it coming down. It would be glowing with the heat and might have retrieved it and bringing it into Piedmont. This was reasonable, except that a native of Piedmont who happened upon an American satellite fresh from space would have told someone, reporters, police, NASA, the army, someone. But they had heard nothing. Hold on. Louis Crane. That's who he is. What does a Ford Econava even look like? Econovan. I figured it was that. An econom van. Ford Econovan. I don't know. It has to be that. It's an economic car after all. I never digest what I'm reading, so I'm rereading some of this stuff. Sean climbed back down from the van with Crane scrambling after him, shivering as the cold air struck him. Together, the two men looked out over the town. It was peaceful, but completely dark. Sean noticed that the gas station and the motel both had their lights doused, yet they represented the only gas station and motel for miles. And then Sean noticed the birds. In the light of the full moon, he could see them, big birds, gliding in slow circles over the buildings, passing like black shadows across the face of the moon. He wondered why he hadn't noticed them before and asked Crane what he made of them. Crane said he didn't make anything of them. As a joke, he added maybe they're buzzards. That's what they look like, all right, Sean said. Crane laughed nervously, his breath hissing out into the night. But why should there be buzzards here? They only came here when something is dead. When something is dead. Sean lit a cigarette, cupping his hands around... Damn, I want a cigarette. Mwah! I love you, kitty. I love you. I love you so much. No, you can't step on the laptop, bro. Go over there. I don't even want you there anyway. Bitch. I don't want you there either. You're so cute. No. You can't. No. No. You see how it's crowded? You silly. I'm annoyed. My fucking pet bird wants to just move around because I keep kicking her out of everywhere. She doesn't get the idea. Or maybe I just don't want her here. But of course I'm gonna want you here. You're so cute. I'm gonna pause and then I'm gonna see if I can find a space for her because she wants to stay here. How do I pause this? These chapters are... Is this the end of the chapter? It might be. Crane laughed nervously and his breath hissing out into the night. But why should there be buzzards here? They only came when something is dead. Sean lit a cigarette, cupping his hands around the lighter, protesting the flame from the wind. He said nothing, but looked down at the buildings, the outline of the little town. Then he scanned the town once more with binoculars, but saw no signs of life or movement. At length, he lowered the binoculars and dropped his cigarette onto the crisp snow, where it sputtered and died. He turned to Crane and said, "We better get down and have a look." They want to find the satellite? Chapter 2, Vandenberg. 300 miles away in the large square windowless room that served as mission control for Project Scoop, Lieutenant Edgar Comro sat with his feet on his desk and a stack of scientific journal articles before him. Comro was serving as control officer for the night. It was a duty he filled once a month, directing the evening operations of the skeleton crew of 12. Tonight, the crew was monitoring the progress and reports of the van coded Caper 1, now making its way across the Arizona desert. Conroe disliked this job. The room was gray and lighted with fluorescent lights. The tone was sparsely utilitarian, and Conroe found it unpleasant. He never came to mission control except during a launch, when the atmosphere was different. Then the room was filled with busy technicians, each at work on a single complex task, each tense with the peculiar cold anticipation that precedes any spacecraft launch. What's utilitarian? Is it like a dictatorship? Designed to be useful, like a tool, like a utility. Practical rather than attractive. Huh. Designed to be useful, like a tool, like a utility. Practical rather than attractive. Huh. But nights were dull. Nothing ever happened at night. Comro took advantage of the time and used it to catch up on reading. By profession, he was a cardiovascular physiologist with special interest in stresses induced at high G accelerations. Titled Stoichiometrics of Oxygen Carrying Capacity and Diffusion Gradients with Increased Arterial Gas Tensions. He found it slow reading and only moderately interesting. Thus, he was willing to be interpreted when the overhead loudspeaker, which carried the voice transmission from the van of Sean and Crane, clicked on. Sean said, "This is Caper 1 to Vandal Dika. Caper 1 to Vandal Dika. Are you reading? Over." Comro, feeling amused, replied that he was indeed reading. "We are about to enter the town of Piedmont and recover the satellite." "Very good, Caper 1. Leave your radio open." "Roger." This was a regulation of the recovery technique as outlined in the Systems Rules Manual of Project Scoop. The SRM was thick gray paper back that sat at one corner of Comro's desk where he could refer to it easily. Comro knew that conversation between Van and Base was taped, and later became part of the permanent project file, but he had never understood any good reason for this. In fact, it had always seemed to him a straightforward proposition. The van went out, got the capsule, and came back. He shrugged and returned to his paper on gas tensions, only half listening to Sean's voice as it said, "We are now inside the town. We have just passed a gas station and a motel. All quiet here. There's no sign of life. The signals from the satellite are stronger. There's a church half a block ahead. There are no lights or activity of any kind." Comro put his journal down. The strained quality of Sean's voice was unmistakable. Normally, Comro would have been amused at the thought of two grown men made jittery by entering a small sleepy desert town. But he knew Sean personally, and he knew that Sean, whatever other virtues he might have, utterly lacked an imagination. Sean could fall asleep in a horror movie. He was that kind of man. Comro began to listen. Over the crackling static, he heard the rumbling of the van engine, and he heard the two men in the van talking quietly. Pretty quiet around here." "Yes, sir." There was a pause. "Sir?" "Yes." "Did you see that?" "See what?" "Back there, on the sidewalk. It looked like a body." "You're imagining things." Another pause, and then Comro heard the van come to a halt, brakes squealing. "Jesus. It's another one, sir. Looks dead. Shall I?" "No. Stay in the van." His voice became louder, more formal, as he ran through the call. "This is Caper 1 to Vandal Deka. Over." Comro picked up the microphone. "Reading you. What's happened?" Sean, his voice tight, said, "Sir, we see bodies. Lots of them. They appear to be dead." "Are you certain, Caper 1? "For Christ's sakes," Sean said. "Of course we're certain." Comro said mildly, "Proceed to the capsule, Caper 1. As he did so, he looked around the room. The 12 other men in the skeleton crew were staring at him, their eyes blank, unseeing. They were listening to the transmission. The van rumbled to life again. Comro swung his feet off the desk and punched the red security button on his console. The button automatically isolated the mission control room. No one would be allowed in or out without Comro's permission. Then he picked up the telephone and said, "Get me Major Manchek. Manchek. That is a stat call. I'll hold." Manchek was the chief duty officer for the month, the man directly responsible for all scoop activities during February. Wow, what a start to the book. I did not expect this story to start pretty fast. That was pretty good. I'm enjoying it so far. Michael Crichton. Huh. All right, let's see where it goes. Let's see where it goes. Pretty good. Sean and what is his name? He had a weird name. Comro? That's not his name. His name is Crane. Crane is cool. I like Crane. See where I was. I'm trying to find it. Of course we're certain, bro. Manchek was the chief officer of the month. While he waited, he cradled the phone in his shoulder and lit a cigarette. Over the loudspeaker, Sean could be heard to say, "Do they look dead to you, Crane?" "Yes, sir. Kind of peaceful, but dead. Somehow they don't really look dead. There's something missing. Something funny. But they're all over. Must be dozens of them. Like they dropped in their tracks, stumbled and fallen down dead. All over the streets, on the sidewalks." Another silence, then Crane. "Sir! Jesus! You see him? The man in the white robe walking across the street. I see him. He's just stepping over them like he's coming toward us. Sir, look, I think we should get out of here. If you don't mind. The next sound was a high-pitched scream and a crunching noise. Transmission ended at this point, and Vandenberg's scoop mission control was not able to raise the two men again. Whatever is going on probably has something to do with the satellite. It could be something else, though. It could be something that's been going on. It hasn't been told. They didn't really say, because they said it's another one, right? So they've been finding dead bodies. Is that what he said? He said you're imagining things, and then he said it's another one, yeah. Or, I don't know. Chapter 3, Crisis. Gladstone, upon hearing of the death of Chinese Gordon in Egypt, was reported to have muttered irritably that his general might have chosen a more propitious time to die. Gordon's death drew the Gladstone government into turmoil and crisis. An aide suggested that the circumstances were unique and unpredictable, to which Gladstone crossly answered, "All crises are the same." He meant political crisis, of course. There were no scientific crises in 1885, and indeed none for nearly 40 years afterward. Since then, there have been 8 of major importance. 2 have received wide publicity. It is interesting that both the publicized crisis, atomic energy and space capability, have concerned chemistry and physics, not biology. This is to be expected. Physics was the first of the natural sciences to become fully modern and highly mathematical. Chemistry followed in the wake of physics, but biology, the retarded child, lagged far behind. Even in the time of Newton and Galileo, men knew more about the moon and other heavenly bodies than they did about their own. It was not until the late 1940s that this situation changed. The post-war period ushered in a new era of biologic research, spurred by the discovery of antibiotics. Suddenly, there was both enthusiasm and money for biology, and a terror of discoveries poured forth. Tranquilizers, steroid hormones, immunochemistry, the genetic code. By 1953, the first kidney was transplanted, and by 1958, the first birth control pills were tested. It was not long before biology was the fastest growing field in all science. It was doubling its knowledge every 10 years. Far-sighted researchers talked seriously of changing genes, controlling evolution, and regulating the mind. Ideas that had been wild speculation 10 years before. And yet there had never been a biologic crisis. The Andromeda strain provided the first. According to Louis Bornheim, a crisis is a situation in which a previously tolerable set of circumstances is suddenly, by the addition of another factor, rendered wholly intolerable. Whether the additional factor is political, economic, or scientific hardly matters. The death of a national hero, the instability of prices, or a technological discovery can all set events in motion. In this sense, Gladstone was right. All crises are the same. The noted scholar Alfred Cochrane, in his study of crisis, culture, crisis, and change, has made several interesting points. First, he observes that every crisis has its beginning, long before the actual onset. Thus, Einstein published his theories of relativity in 1905 to 15, 40 years before his work culminated in the end of a war, the start of an age, and the beginnings of a crisis. Similarly, in the early 20th century, American, German, and Russian scientists were all interested in space travel, but only the Germans recognized the military potential of rockets. And after the war, when the German rocket installation of Peenemünde was cannibalized by the Soviets and Americans, it was only the Russians who made immediate, vigorous moves toward developing space capabilities. The Americans were content to tinker playfully with rockets, and 10 years later, this resulted in an American scientific crisis involving Sputnik. American education, the ICBM, and the missile gap. Cochrane also observes that a crisis is compounded of individuals and personalities which are unique. It is as difficult to imagine Alexander at the Rubicon and Eisenhower at Waterloo as it is difficult to imagine Darwin writing to Roosevelt about the potential of an atomic bomb. A crisis is made by men who enter into the crisis with their own prejudices, propensities, and predispositions. A crisis is a sum of intuition and blind spots, a blend of facts noted and facts ignored. What is propensity?
Propensity.
An inclination or natural tendency to behave in a particular way. Yet underlying the uniqueness of each crisis is disturbing sameness. A characteristic of all crises is their predictability in retrospect. They seem to have a certain inevitability. They seem predestined. This is not true of all crises, but it is true of sufficiently many to make the most hardened historian cynical and misanthropic. Disliking humankind and avoiding human society. In the light of Cochrane's arguments, it is interesting to consider the background and personalities involved in the Andromeda strain. At the time of Andromeda, there had never been a crisis of biological science, and the first Americans faced with the facts were not disposed to think in terms of one. Shawn and Crane were capable but not thoughtful men, and Edgar Comro, the night officer at Vandenberg, though a scientist, was not prepared to consider anything beyond the immediate irritation of a quiet evening ruined by an inexplicable problem. According to protocol, Comro called his superior officer, Major Arthur Manchek, and here the story takes a different turn, for Manchek was both prepared and disposed to consider a crisis of the most major proportions, but he was not prepared to acknowledge it. Major Manchek, his face still creased with sleep, sat on the edge of Comro's desk and listened to the replay of the tape from the van. When it was finished, he said, "Strangest damn thing I ever heard," and played it over again. While he did so, he carefully filled his pipe and tobacco, lit it, and tamped it down. Arthur Manchek was an engineer, a quite heavy-set man, plagued by labile hypertension, which threatened to end further promotions as an army officer. He had been advised on many occasions to lose weight, but he had been unable to do so. He was therefore considering abandoning the army for a career as a scientist in private industry, where people did not care about your weight or blood pressure was. What is labile? Liable to change, is easily altered. Manchek had come to Vandenberg from Wright-Patterson in Ohio, where he had been in charge of experiments in spacecraft landing methods. His job had been to develop a capsule shape that could touch down with equal safety on either land or sea. Manchek had succeeded in developing 3 new shapes that were promising. His success led to a promotion and transfer to Vandenberg. Here, he did administrative work and hated it. People bored Manchek. The mechanics of manipulation and the vagaries of subordinate personality held no fascination for him. He often wished he were back at the wind tunnels of Wright-Patterson. What is vagary? A lot of words I don't know. Particularly on nights when he was called out of bed by some damn fool problem. Tonight he felt irritable and under stress. His reaction to this was characteristic. He became slow. He moved slowly, he thought slowly, he proceeded with a dull and plodding deliberation. It was the secret of his success. Whenever people around him became excited, Manchek seemed to grow more disinterested until he appeared about to fall asleep. It was a trick he had for remaining totally objective and clear-headed. Now he sighed and puffed on his pipe as the tape spun out for the second time. No communications breakdown, I take it. Conroe shook his head. We checked all systems at this end. We are still monitoring the frequency. He turned on the radio and hissing static filled the room. You know about the audio screen? Vaguely, Manchek said, suppressing a yawn. In fact, the audio screen was a system he had developed 3 years before. In simplest terms, it was a computerized way to find a needle in a haystack. A machine program that listened to apparently garbled random sound and picked out certain irregularities. For example, the hubbub of conversation at an embassy cocktail party could be recorded and fed through the computer, which would pick out a single voice and separate it from the rest. It has several intelligence applications. Well, Conroe said, after the transmission ended, we got nothing but the static you hear now. We put it through the radio screen to see if the computer could pick it up a pattern, and we ran it through the oscilloscope in the corner. Across the room, the green face of the scope displayed a jagged dancing white line. The summated sound of static. Then, Conroe said, we put in the computer, like so. We cut in the computer. He punched a button on his desk console. The oscilloscope line had changed character abruptly. It suddenly became quieter, more regular, with a pattern of beating, thumping pulses. I see, Manchek said. He had in fact already identified the pattern and assessed its meaning. His mind was drifting elsewhere, considering other possibilities, wider ramifications. Here's the audio, Conroe said. He pressed another button and the audio version of the signal filled the room. It was a steady mechanical grinding with a repetitive metallic click. Manchek nodded. An engine, with a knock. Yes, sir. We believe the van radio is still broadcasting and that the engine is still running. That's what we're hearing now, with the static screened away. All right, Manchek said. His pipe went out. He sucked on it for a moment, then lit it again, removed it from his mouth, and plucked a bit of tobacco from his tongue. We need evidence, he said, almost to himself. He was considering categories of evidence and possible findings. Contingencies. Evidence of what? Conroe said. Manchek ignored the question. Have we got a scavenger on the base? I'm not sure, sir. If we don't, we can get one from Edwards. Then do it. Manchek stood up. He made his decision and now he felt tired again. An evening of telephone calls faced him. An evening of irritable operators and bad connections and puzzled voices at the other end. will want to fly by over that town, he said. And a complete scan. All canisters to come directly. Alert the labs. He also ordered Comro to bring the technicians, especially Jaggers. Manchek disliked Jaggers, who was effete and precious. Is it effete or effete?
Effete.
Okay. Especially Jaggers, who was effete and precious. But Manchek also knew that Jaggers was good, and tonight he needed a good man. At 11:07 p.m., Samuel Gunnar Wilson was moving at 645 miles per hour over the Mojave Desert. Up ahead in the moonlight, he saw the twin Lee jets, their afterburners glowing angrily in the night sky, the planes in a heavy, pregnant look. Phosphorus bombs were slung beneath the wings and belly. Wilson's plane was different, sleek and long and black. It was a Scavenger, one of 7 in the world. The Scavenger was the operational version of the X-18. It was an intermediate-range reconnaissance jet aircraft fully equipped for day and night intelligence flights. It was fitted with side-slung 16mm cameras, one for the visible spectrum and one for low-frequency radiation. In addition, it had a center-mount Hohmann's infrared multi-specs camera, as well as the usual electronic and radio detection gear. All films and plates were, of course, processed automatically in the air and were ready for the viewing as soon as this aircraft returned to base. All this technology made the Scavenger almost impossibly sensitive. It could map the outlines of a city in blackout and could follow the movements of individual trucks and cars at 8,000 feet. It could detect a submarine to a depth of 200 feet. It could locate harbor mines by wave motion deformities, and it could obtain a precise photograph of a factory from the residual heat of the building 4 hours after it has shut down. Damn, that's cool. So the Scavenger was the ideal instrument to fly over Piedmont, Arizona in the dead of night. Wilson carefully checked his equipment, his hands fluttering over the controls and touching each button and lever, watching the blinking green lights that indicated that all systems were in order. His earphones crackled. The lead plane said lazily, "Coming up on the town, Gunner. You see it?" He leaned forward in the cramped cockpit. He was low, only 500 feet below the ground, and for a moment he could see nothing but a blur of sand, snow, and yucca trees. Then, up ahead, buildings in the moonlight. "Roger, I see it. Okay, Gunner, give us some room." He dropped back, putting half a mile between himself and the other 2 planes. They were going into the P-square formation. Damn, that's cool. I gotta visualize that. What does that look like? P. Oh, I think I know what it means. It means a square. All right. All right. Uh-oh. I really need to pay attention to this guy. Every sentence is important, I guess. He dropped back, putting half a mile between himself and the other 2 planes. They were going into the P-square formation. for direct visualization of target by phosphorus flare. Direct visualization was not really necessary. Scavenger could function without it, but Vandenberg seemed insistent that they gather all possible information about the town. The lead plane spread, moving wide until they were parallel to the main street of the town. Gunner, ready to roll? Wilson placed his fingers delicately over the camera buttons. 4 fingers, as if playing the piano. Ready. We're going in now. The 2 planes swooped low, dipping gracefully around the town. They were now very wide and seemingly inches above the ground as they began to release the bombs. What? The bombs? As each struck the ground, a blazing white-hot sphere went up, bathing the town in an unearthly glaring light and reflecting off the metal underbellies of the planes. The jets climbed their run finished. But Gunner did not see them. His entire attention, his mind and his body was focused on the town. That's sad. They just killed so many people. Damn. Palestine. The jets climbed over, their run finished, but Gunnar did not see them. His entire attention, his mind and body was focused on the town. All yours, Gunnar. Wilson did not answer. He dropped his nose, cracked down his flaps, and felt a shudder as the plane sank sickeningly, like a stone, toward the ground. Below him, the area below around the town was lighted for hundreds of yards in every direction. He pressed the camera buttons and felt, rather than heard, the vibrating whir of the cameras. For a long moment he continued to fall, and then he showed the stick forward, shoved, and the plane seemed to catch in the air, to grab and lift and climb. He had a fleeting glimpse of the main street. He saw bodies everywhere, spread-eagled, lying in the streets, across cars. Jesus, he said. And then he was up, still climbing, bringing the plane around in a slow arc, preparing for the descent into his second run and trying not to blink of what he had seen. One of the first rules of air reconnaissance was ignore the scenery. Analysis and evaluation were not the job of the pilot. That was left to the experts and pilots who forgot this, who became too interested in what they were photographing, got into trouble. Usually they crashed. As the plane came down into a flat second run, he tried not to look at the ground. But he did, and again, saw the bodies. The phosphorus flares were burning low. The lighting was darker, more sinister and subdued. But the bodies were still there. He had not been imagining it. Jesus, he said again. Sweet Jesus. The sign on the door said Data Pro 6 Epsilon, and underneath in red lettering, admission by clearance card only. Inside was a comfortable sort of briefing room. Screen on one wall, a dozen steel tubing and leather chairs facing it, and a projector in the back. When Manchek and Comro entered the room, Jaggers was already waiting for them, standing at the front of the room by the screen. Jaggers was a short man with a springy step and an eager, rather hopeful face, though not well liked on the base. He was nonetheless the acknowledged master of reconnaissance interpretation. He had the sort of mind that delighted in small and puzzling details and was well suited to his job. Jaggers rubbed his hands as Manchek and Comro sat down. Well then, he said, might as well get right to it. I think we have something to interest you tonight. He nodded to the projectionist in the back. First picture. The room lights darkened. There was a mechanical click and the screen lighted to show an aerial view of a small desert town. This is an unusual shot, Jagger said. From our files, taken 2 months ago from Janos 12, our recon satellite, orbiting at an altitude of 187 miles, as you know. The technical quality where is quite good. Here, can't read the license plate on the cars yet, but we're working on it. Perhaps by next year. Manchek shifted in his chair, but said nothing. You can see the town here, Jagger said. Piedmont, Arizona, population 48, and not much to look at, even from 187 miles. Here's the general store, the gas station. Notice how clearly you can read Gulf. And the post office, the motel. Everything else you see is private residences. Church over here. Well, next picture. Another click. This was dark, with a reddish tint, and was clearly an overview of the town in white and dark red. The outlines of the buildings were very dark. We begin here with the scavenger IR plates. There are infrared films, as you know, which produce a picture on the basis of heat instead of light. Anything warm appears white on the picture, anything cold is black. Now then, you can see here that the buildings are dark. They are colder than the ground. As night comes on, the buildings give up their heat more rapidly. What are those white spots? Carmel said. There were 40 or 50 white areas on the film. Those, Jagger said, are bodies. Some inside houses, some in the street. By count, they number 50. In the case of some of them, such as this one here, you can make out the four limbs and head clearly. This body is lying flat in the street. He lit a cigarette and pointed to a white rectangle. As nearly as we can tell, this is an automobile. Notice it's got a bright white spot at one end. This means the motor is still running, still generating heat. The van, Carmel said. Manchek nodded. The question now arises, Jagger said. Are all these people dead? We cannot be certain about that. The bodies appear to be of different temperatures. 47 are rather cold, indicating death some time ago. Death or warmer. Is it death or deaths? 3 are warmer. Why did I say deaths? Two of them are in the car here. Are men, Carmel said. And the third? The third is rather puzzling. You see him here, apparently standing or lying curled in the street. Observe he is quite white and therefore quite warm. Our temperature scans indicate that he is about 95 degrees, which is a little on the cool side, but probably attributable to peripheral vasoconstriction in the night desert air. Drops his skin temperature. Next slide. The third film flickered onto the screen. Manchek frowned at the spot. It's moved. Exactly. This film was made on the second passage. The spot was moved approximately 20 yards. Next picture. A third film. Moved again. Yes, an additional 5 or 10 yards. So one person down there is alive. That, Jagger said, is the presumptive conclusion. Manchek cleared his throat. Does that mean it's what you think? Yes, sir. It is what we think. There's a man down there, walking among the corpses? Jagger shrugged and taped the screen. It is difficult to account for the data in any other manner, and at that moment, a private entered the room with 3 circular metal canisters under his arm. Sir, we have films of the direct visualization by P-Square. Run them, Manchek said. The film was threaded into a projector. A moment later, Lieutenant Wilson was ushered into the room. Jagger said, I haven't reviewed these films yet. Perhaps the pilot should narrate. Manchek nodded and looked at Wilson, who got up and walked to the front of the room, wiping his hands nervously on his pants. He stood alongside the screen and faced his audience, beginning in a flat monotone. Sir, my flybys were made between 11:08 and 11:13 p.m. this evening. There were 2, a start from the east and a return from the west, done at an average speed of 214 miles per hour at a median altitude by corrected altimeter of 800 feet and in... Just a minute, son, Manchek said, raising his hand. This isn't a grilling. Just tell it naturally. That's cool. Wilson nodded and swallowed. The room lights went down and the projector whirred to life. The screen showed the town bathed in glaring white light as the plane came down over it. This is my first paths. This is my first paths, Wilson said. East to west, at 11:08, We're looking from the left wing camera, which is running at 96 frames per second. As you can see, my altitude is falling rapidly. Straight ahead is the main street of the target. He stopped. The bodies were clearly visible, and the van stopped in the street. Its rooftop antenna still turning slow revolutions. As the plane continued its run, approaching the van, they could see the driver collapsed over the steering wheel. Excellent definition, Jagger said. That fine-grained film really gives resolution when you need. Wilson, Manchek said, was telling us about his run. Yes, sir, Wilson said. Clearing his throat, he stared at the screen. At this time, I am right over the target where I observed the casualties you see. Here. My estimate at that time was 75, sir. His voice was quiet and tense. There was a break in the film. Some numbers, and the image came on again. Now I am coming back for my second run, Wilson said. The flares are already burning low, but you can see. Stop the film, Manchek said. The projectionist froze the film at a single frame. It showed the long, straight main street of the town and the bodies. Go back. The film was run backward, and the jet seeming to pull away from the street. There. Stop it now. The frame was frozen. Manchek got up and walked close to the screen, peering off to one side. Look at this, he said, pointing to a figure. It was a man in knee length with white robes, standing and looking up at the plane. He was an old man with a withered face. His eyes were wide. What do you make of this? Manchek said to Jaggers. Jaggers moved close. He frowned, running forward a bit. The film advanced. They could clearly see the man turn his head, roll his eyes, following the plane as it passed over him. Now backward, Jaggers said. The film was run back. Jaggers smiled bleakly. This man looks alive to me, sir. Yes, Manchek said crisply. He certainly does. And with that, he walked out of the room. As he left, he paused and announced that he was declaring a state of emergency, that everyone on the base was confined to quarters until further notice, that there would be no outside calls or communication, and that what they had seen in this room was confidential. Outside in the hallway, he headed for the mission control. Conroe followed him. I want you to call General Wheeler, Manchek said. Tell him I have declared an SOE without proper authorization and ask him to come down immediately. Technically, no one but the commander had the right to declare a state of emergency. Conroe said, Wouldn't you rather tell him yourself? I got other things to do, Manchek said. Yo, what's going on? What the fuck is going on? Yo, state of emergency. Conroe? Who's Conroe's first name? That was a good intro for chapter 3 for sure. This is the best chapter. Chapter 4. Alert. 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 I don't know if I want to read it. Oh, alright. I'll read it. I guess it's just one page. Chapter 4. Alert. When Arthur Manchek stepped into the small, soundproof booth and sat down before the telephone, he knew exactly what he was going to do, but he was not very sure why he was doing it. As one of the senior scoop officers, he had received a briefing nearly a year before on Project Wildfire. It had been given, Manchek remembered, by a short little man with a dry, precise way of speaking. He was a university professor, and he had outlined the project. Manchek had forgotten the details, except that there was a laboratory somewhere and a team of 5 scientists who could be alerted to man the laboratory. The function of the team was investigation of possible extraterrestrial life forms, introduced on American spacecraft returning to Earth. Manchek had not been told of the 5 men who the 5 men were. He knew only that a special Defense Department trunk line existed for calling them out. In order to hook into the line, one had only to dial the binary of some number. He reached into his pocket and withdrew his wallet, then fumbled for a moment until he found the card he had been given by the professor. In case of fire, notify Division 87. Emergency only. He stared at the card and wondered what exactly would happen if he dialed the binary of 87. He tried to imagine the sequence of events. Who would he talk to? Would someone call him back? Would there be an inquiry, a referral to higher authority? He rubbed his eyes and stared at the card, and finally he shrugged. One way or the other, he would find out. He tore a sheet of paper from the pad in front of him next to the telephone and wrote 2 to the power of 1, 2 to the power of 1, 2 to the power of 0, 2 to the power of 1, 2 to the power of 2, 2 to the power of 3, 2 to the power of 4, 2 to the power of 5, 2 to the power of 6, 2 to the power of 7. This was the basis of the binary system. Base 2 raised to some power. 2 to the 0 power was 1, 2 to the first was 2, 2 squared was 4, and so on. Manchek quickly wrote another line beneath. 2 to the power of 0, 2 to the power, we already wrote that, we already read that. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. Then he began to add up the numbers to get a total of 87. He circled these numbers. 1, 2, 4, 16, 64 equals 87. And then he drew the binary code. Binary numbers were designed for computers which utilize an on-off, yes-no kind of language. A mathematician once joked that binary numbers were the way people who have only 2 fingers count. In essence, binary numbers translated normal numbers, which required 10 digits and decimal places, to a system that depended on only 2 digits, 1 and 0. 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Interesting. Manchek looked at the number he had just written and inserted the dashes. 1 dash 1 1 0 dash 1 0 1 0. A perfectly reasonable telephone number. Smart. The time was exactly 12 midnight. Day 2. Piedmont. I'm actually nervous. Michael Crichton. He's a pretty good writer. Alert. Were there really extraterrestrials over there? Chapter 5, The Early Hours. We're going to stop right there. We read about 32 pages in one night. I need to go to sleep. I have work in the morning. That was fun. At least I started the Andromeda strain. That's dope. I didn't expect to start that story so soon. I'm literally 125 pages in Salem's Lot. Yo, I'm gonna be honest. I low-key want to finish this story. This intro is better than the Salem's Lot intro. This is better than Salem's Lot so far. Way better. Sorry, Stephen King. Do you really need 120 pages to build up some characters? I mean... I don't want to close the book. I honestly want to keep reading. Oh, I want to keep reading, bro. What is this story? What is this? I don't know what this is. I just got a restriction because I'm smoking. That was fun. That was Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain. We will continue tomorrow, I hope. I might even read it without you guys because I'll be at work. Sorry. I don't mean to, but... I don't think I'll be able to contain myself. I'll catch you on the flip side.